Begin by telling you that this coming Shabbos we're going to read Parshat Eikev. Eikev means when, but Eikev also, and we've spoken about this before, Eikev means a heel, the heel of the foot. Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, was called Yaakov because he was holding on to the heel of his brother Esau, his brother Esau. When we use a Hebrew word, and even if it's like this, a preposition, or it's a seemingly insignificant word in the sentence, the way that it's used, and when it's used in this way, word Eikev, it's got to have an ability to be played out in all its different meanings. You know, very often if you take a Hebrew dictionary and you look up a certain word, you sometimes get from the same word very, very different meanings. From a Torah point of view, there's got to be a link. There's got to be something that connects them. And the fact that this word means when, or it can also mean a heel, we've got to be able to interpret it in the way of the heel as well as in the way of when. The next word is the word tishma'un. So if we think about the point of the second word of this parsha being Eikev, a heel, the second one, tishma'un, means to hear. It will be when you will hearken to, when you will listen to, when you will hear. We're talking about a different part of the anatomy, a different part of the human body. There is the heel and there's the ear. Now, I don't know if any of you are rugby fans, but there was I think we all know about head over heels, right? Head over heels, but there was a rugby term that's got something to do with heel to the head, right? So maybe here we're trying to paint a little bit of a picture of the fact that we've got a very, very low down part of our body, which is the Eikev, the heel, and the heel is touching the ground. We've got an ear which hears sounds. Now, sounds are a little bit less tangible than things that are physical, that you can touch. A sound is something that gets into the realm of being more, let's put it in inverted commas, spiritual. It's less tangible, less physical, a sound. Yes, we now are sitting in the age of technology where sounds and sights and pictures and so on, so much can be conveyed through machinery, but you still can't see a sound. You can hear a sound. And the hearing is a higher spiritual faculty than the sound, than something that you can touch, something that's tangible and physical. Okay. Perhaps, though, what we're really talking about here is total commitment, because we're talking about the fact that our heel needs to be involved in our mitzvahs and our ears need to be involved in our mitzvahs, and it's kind of going maybe from one end of the body to the next. Total commitment, total involvement. Amafarshim, our Torah commentators, particularly Rashi, tells us that there are certain mitzvahs that a person may be what he calls dash be'ikvav. There are certain mitzvahs that a person may tread underfoot. And this is the hint of the heel, that you and I know that there are some mitzvahs that are big, there's some that are small. And the small ones, sometimes we could tread over or overlook. And Torah is giving us a direct command here. Don't overlook the small stuff. Just remember the things that you think are insignificant, the things that you may view to be trodden under your heel. In God's world and in Torah, they are hugely important. Don't discount anything. Maybe a slightly different way of looking at it. Somebody was actually asking me just this morning, how do you reconcile that there are some people who are giving out the image of being religious, of being frum, and yet back at the ranch, they're not so moral, they're not so ethical? How do you harmonize that? How do you put that into the same framework? How is it that a person is walking around, I don't know, with a yarmulke and a tzitzis and a beard and whatever, and trying to put out this impression of being so religious, but they're not honest in business? Let's use that as an example. It's an age-old question. What's the real answer? The real answer is there are 613 mitzvahs. There is a huge Torah out there. Some people see some things as more important than others. And the fact is that by and large, we all do that. It's not just the frumi who is sinning by being a ganef in business. It's not just that. We're all doing that to an extent. We all pick and choose the mitzvahs that we feel are more important. If I were to ask you, if we were to throw out the question here, which is the preferable person? Which is the better Jew? The guy who is frum, religious, davening 3 times a day, putting on tefillin, learning Torah, but he's not honest in business? Or the guy who's honest in business and doesn't go near a shul? Which is the better Jew? What would our answer be? Logic would dictate, the first thing that springs to mind is, I'd prefer to have the friend in the guy who's honest in business. Torah learning and all this religiosity and so on, not necessarily correct in choosing. He's a fraud. We would call him a fraud. He's a fraud. He's dressed up with all the garb and he's misbehaving. Torah has a slightly different judgment of such a thing, I think. And that's to say, there are 613 mitzvahs. There are some that you regard as important. There are some that I regard as important. We unfortunately do that all the time. And therefore, to say that the one is the better Jew than the other, not necessarily true. He is better in that realm, and he's bad in this realm. And the other one is better in that realm and bad in this realm. Who says which one's better? We can't do that. Torah does tell us all, though, don't have certain mitzvahs that you tread underfoot. To you, they may be the first 10. To me, they may be the next 10. To the third guy, it may be the next ones. We mustn't pick and choose. We must try our utmost to be as, let's call it emotionally, spiritually, wholesomely honest, that we call ourselves Jewish. We subscribed to a Torah really means all the mitzvahs of Torah. The fact that I'm not getting to do some of them, that's what they would call in the classics, my bad. That's me making a mistake. That's me not doing right. But is it for me to say that you're better or worse than me because you are doing other mitzvahs differently? No. We've all got to aspire to try and make sure that what we hear and what we do with the sole of our foot, the heel of the foot, has a unanimity to it, and that we don't, God forbid, say, this is insignificant, doesn't matter, it's a small thing, I can overlook it. We've got to pay homage to and keep cognizance of and subscribe to everything that God gives us in the Torah. Otherwise, we are playing God and deciding this is important, this is not important. And you and I know very often it's the small things that matter. It's a little thing, a little gesture. I often thought about it. I mean, you have too. The fact that somebody we spoke about before, Eleanor was mentioning there, that people, it's brought out so much goodwill. The fact that you just smile at somebody is sometimes worth more than everything that you thought you were doing for the world to save the whole world. The fact that you smiled at somebody, that you greeted somebody, that you were kind to somebody, that is what is important. Somebody making a noise there. I just muted everybody. Okay. Now, at the beginning of the parsha, we then go on to give a special bracha to everybody. And the bracha that's given to everybody is actually very, very fascinating, because there is a blessing that it says, from the Lord your God, for the Lord your God is bringing you to a good land, And then we go on to describe the land. And how do we describe the land of Israel? We say it's a land of wheat, barley, grapes, figs, and pomegranates, a land of oil-yielding olives and honey, which actually we say comes not honey from the bees, but honey from dates. Right now, we are talking about 7 species that we have thought about before and spoken about before, 7 species with which Israel is blessed. And we're told, if you will keep to all the mitzvahs, you also will be blessed in a similar way with these 7 species. Let's go through them again. What are they? What are the 7 species? Wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates. Yes? Let's just digest this for a moment. While we're talking about nice fruit, it's time to digest. Let's just digest this for a moment. Originally, when Hashem created the world, the Torah tells us, every tree bore fruit. Did you know that? Every tree bore fruit. In Gan Eden, every tree had fruit on it. Not just the tree that Adam and Eve supposedly ate from, but every tree had fruit. The fact is, part of the post-Garden of Eden experience was that some trees are barren, some trees don't have fruits, and others do. It's always fascinated me, I'm sure you too, that some trees need a male and a female in order to bear fruit. I think avocados is one of them. I was told that the etrog tree needs a male and a female. I'm not sure if that's true, because I've got one etrog tree in my garden, and I will tell you, in 7 or 8, I think 10 years, it has borne fruit twice, 2 etrogim that I've got from that, and there's no female around that I can see, right? It's one tree. So I'm not sure, but it's a fascinating thing that fruit is a result of the trees, sometimes their interaction. But there were certain trees that remained barren after Gan Eden. Originally, all bore fruit. After the Garden of Eden, the sin in the Garden of Eden, certain trees did not have fruit anymore. When Mashiach comes, we're told, it'll revert, that every tree will have fruit. Did you know that? Every tree is going to have fruit in the future. So you're going to walk outside, you're going to see the beautiful trees outside, everyone will have fruit. These titles, these fruits that we speak about in this week's parasha, are the ones that are particularly blessed, and particularly Israel is blessed with them. But here Hashem is giving us a blessing, and he's telling you and me that if we listen to Hashem's wishes, if we do Hashem's mitzvahs, each and every one of us will be blessed with those fruits. What does it mean? You and me. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't have an orchard at home. Yes, I've told you now, I've got an etrog tree, and I'm not the greatest gardener or farmer, but I don't have a wheat field, and I don't have a barley field, and I don't have a place where I grow pomegranates, and I don't have a place where I grow olives. I don't know if they would grow in this climate. So what does it mean that you and I, it is you and I, you and me, no, me is blessed, I am blessed, it's you and I, that you and I are blessed with the blessing of these fruits. What does that actually mean? There is a very, very beautiful Hasidic insight into what these fruits actually represent in you, and here now it's me, in you and me. There is a very, very significant and beautiful interpretation to what it actually means. So let's begin with wheat and barley. I think you'll agree that the others we know as fruit that grows on trees. Wheat and barley, there's a slight difference. We wouldn't necessarily term them usually to be fruits. When you sit down to a bowl of fruit, or you have a bowl of fruit there, wheat and barley would probably not feature there. But what are wheat and barley? Well, first of all, when we think about the concept of wheat, we know that wheat is the substance from which we make bread. So the main sustenance of man comes from wheat. Barley, while we sometimes like it in our soup, barley is more associated with animals. Agreed? Yes? Barley is a lower kind of a grain, more associated with animals. When we think about these two, perhaps, says this thought, we are referring to the concept within each and every one of us of a godly soul and an animal soul. What is the sustenance or the substance that feeds your godly soul? We often talk about that as being lechem. What was lechem? Lechem is bread. What's bread made from? It's made from wheat. We're not only referring to the actual bread that you eat with your meal and you're going to have for your challah on Friday night or Shabbos. We're talking about the lechem that sustains us as human beings, our Torah, our Yiddishkeit, our value system, and so on. What is the blessing of having good wheat in this analogy? The blessing of having the right spiritual sustenance, which is going to sustain us from our Torah and our mitzvahs and so on. When we talk about barley, barley is the stuff of animals. Now, you and I, unfortunately, also have animal souls. Well, let me speak about me rather than referring to you. Most people have animal souls. An animal soul, we term it to be the Yetzer Hara, but rather our animal soul. That animal soul needs certain sustenance as well. We can't survive only on spirituality. If we said, well, we're just going to learn Torah, and I'm not going to eat breakfast, lunch, or supper ever again, what am I going to do? I'm going to die. I'm not going to be able to survive. I need food. I need something to sustain me. Perhaps it says this is the symbol of this animal soul, animal barley that we need. Now, a bracha is that perhaps each and every one of us has to get to a stage where we have the correct balance. You know, they always talk about if you, and I'm not saying that anybody in this group has been, but if you go to a dietitian, the dietitian will usually tell you, you need, what do they call it, a balanced diet. The Rambam Maimonides talks about a balanced diet as well. And his clear advice is that, you know, you shouldn't have too much of anything. He actually invented the phrase, believe it or not, you know, like everything in moderation. The Rambam didn't really believe that any particular foods were particularly bad for you. Of course, keeping the laws of kashrus, definitely, but you need a balance. You can eat a little bit of hot food. You can eat a little bit of sweet food. He recommends that this is eaten in the summer and this is eaten in the winter, and you've got to warm the body and so on. And there's certain foods you shouldn't eat at night, and there's certain foods you shouldn't eat when you wake up, and so on. Fine. But moderation. There needs to be a balance. We usually take the concept of a balanced diet from our dietitians or our medical personnel to mean that we've got to have enough carbs and proteins and so on, and like keep it balanced and make sure that our body functions regularly and so on. We need all of that. Great. From a Torah point of view, you need a balanced diet. The balanced diet means that we've got to be able to be able to know when to take on board the barley that is going to keep our bodies going and keep us alive. But most importantly, we've got to know that we cannot live without Torah. We cannot live without wheat. We can't live without the mainstay of our lives, without our real bread, the bread of our faith. We can't live without that. So we need food and we need fodder, let's call it. We need wheat and we need barley. But we've got to know the moderation. If you're going to overindulge from a physical point of view in the animal food, let's call it, you become more animalistic. That's when people start referring to one as being grob. You become grob. You're like you sitting down and you're fressing via behemoth. You're eating like an animal. That's not the way we're supposed to behave. We've got to have this balance in our lives. So perhaps as a suggestion, that's our wheat and our barley. We now move to the realm of when we have this balance right, we can now start talking about the real fruits of the trees. Torah refers to us, it's not in this parsha, it's in a couple of weeks' time. A few weeks' time, we're going to read about the idea of ki ha'adam eitz hasadehu. We're told if you go out to war, you're not allowed to cut down a tree. And we know that this applies to a fruit-bearing tree. You're not allowed to cut down a fruit tree. So, I don't know if you've ever had that experience. You need to build onto a house. You need to extend. You need to whatever. You got to cut down a fruit tree. There are all sorts of shilas about cutting down a fruit tree, and certainly not when you go to war. Do you remember it was part of the way that the Russians rebuffed Napoleon in the Napoleonic War against Russia? They had what they called the scorched earth policy, where they, I think they did it later. I think they did it to Hitler as well, Yamach Shmoy, in the Second World War, where they burnt everything. You burn everything so that the advancing troops can't benefit from anything on the land. You come there and everything's burnt and is gone. So the opposing soldiers started dying in the terrible winter. There was no sustenance to come from the land. We as Jews are instructed, you go out to battle, you go out to war, you're not allowed to cut down fruit trees. Even if it's in your enemy, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to cut down fruit trees. Why? Because it says, man is like the tree of the field. Similarly, when it comes to the fruits that are born there is a link between the fruit and man. Each and every one of us, in inverted commas, has these spiritual fruits, which are manifestations of our lives, of our souls, and the way that we behave and so on. So let's go through them. If we want to take the first one, the first of the fruits that's mentioned is geffen, which means grape, the grape. What is the grape? The grape is a fruit, I think you'll agree with me, that whenever we talk about wine and grape and so on, there's a certain richness to it, right? There's a richness to it. I think I'm right in saying, like if you depicted a king sitting on his throne in the times of King Arthur or whoever it was, we were picking at a grape and popping it in the mouth. It's like, it's sort of got a certain royalty to it. When you take the grape and you squeeze it and you make a wine, again, something choshev, something significant. This, by the way, is the reason why we use grape juice or wine for kiddush. The concept of it being chashuv, it is royal, it's regal, it's special. It's not just any old drink, it is special. It's made from a grape. But predominantly, wine or grapes do two things to us. You can agree to disagree or not agree at all, but when we talk about grapes and wine, they do two things to us. One is, Torah says, nichnas yain yatzasod. What does it mean? When you drink wine, it brings out secrets. Secrets emerge. So as soon as somebody has a couple of lechaims, they start spilling the beans. The tongue wags. People become a little bit more expressive, let's call it. It can also, unfortunately, sometimes when people drink, so part of this whole lockdown experience that we have battled to get our head around some of the rules and regulations has been the ban on alcohol. Why has there been a ban on alcohol? Because they have found, and I believe on good authority, it was the doctors in the state hospitals who campaigned the president to ban alcohol again. And as soon as they did it, their hospitals emptied out. There is so much bad behavior that comes from alcohol, that comes from people utilizing it. Unfortunately, when you drink, it can bring out bad tendencies if those bad tendencies are hidden within you. What we hope is, from a Jewish point of view, and that's why we use it on Shabbos, is that when you drink wine, it brings out the best in you. It takes away some of your animal inhibitions and makes you more spiritual. It doesn't always work that way, because it ultimately depends what that neshama is like inside, what that soul is like inside. And therefore, yes, if a person gets aggressive when they drink, we tell them, don't drink. You're not allowed to do that. Why? Because you're bringing out a negative trait and it doesn't work for you. The concept of yayin, of wine, of a grape, is it brings out something that's embedded within you. What's the main thing that's embedded within you? And you think about, when is wine or alcohol, or should it be predominantly served? Is that a simcha? Wine is synonymous with simcha. We just came through the period of the 3 weeks and then the 9 days. And one of the things that we didn't have, we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, was we didn't have wine. Why? Wine is a connotation of, and it's a symbol of joy, of simcha. Now, simcha is supposed to be the level of our behavior always. Yes, believe it or not, we're always supposed to be besimcha. We're always supposed to be positive. It's not always so simple. You can't always dictate, hey, you be positive. Hey, you be happy. It's not always so easy. People are struggling. People have their own battles. They have their difficulties, their darknesses, their lonelinesses, and so on. Not always so easy. But we're told that this should be the mainstay of Jewish life. And therefore, the blessing of wine or of a grape is the idea of joy, of simcha. It's a character trait that we hope and pray for all the time. I don't think there is a person on this group or a person on any group or a person out anywhere who wouldn't, I mean, you got to be a bit of a meshugana if you don't want to be happy. We all want to be happy. We want to be positive. We want to be joyous. We don't like to be sad. It's not, I think you may disagree with me sometimes. You know, some people who, like, I don't know, drama queens, or people who like revel in tragedy and in sadness or whatever. We're not talking about that. That's not normal Jewish thinking. Normal Jewish thinking is, we want to, normal thinking, I think, of the human being, we want to be happy. We want to be positive, joy. So the bracha of the grape is to be able to have joy and excitement in everything that we do. And perhaps relating to Torah, and perhaps relating to mitzvahs. It's not always that easy to muster up the excitement to, I don't know, to go to shul. It's not always that easy to muster up excitement about davening. It's not always that easy to muster up excitement about giving tzedakah. But Torah tells us, yes, you know something, you should have a grape attitude, not a great attitude, a grape attitude to all the mitzvahs that you do. You should do them with joy, you should do them with excitement. If we go on and we think about this next one, let's think about figs. What is the story of the fig? Now, according to the Midrash, the fruit that Adam and Eve ate from in the Garden of Eden was either a grape or a fig. This Pirush likes the idea that it was a fig. And it tells us that part of what happened when Adam and Eve ate from the fig was actually they realized their physicality. Remember, that's what happened. Straight away, they realized that they're naked. Until that moment, nakedness didn't bother them, because they realized before that everything was holy. We were holy people. There wasn't an element of any part of them not being holy. Eating from the fig gave them that realization of animal. It gave them the realization of the negative, of the unclean. That's what it gave them. And right away, what do? They go and cover themselves. What do they cover themselves? The nearest leaves, the fig leaves, right? That's what they covered themselves with in order to hide their nakedness. It was a sign of embarrassment, yes. But it was also this idea of, we say that Adam, the mistake that he made was he really wanted to delve into the physical world. He wanted to get into the physicality. And this perhaps is what the fig represents. So yes, people can be greatly successful in business, for instance, and they don't give an iota of their wealth to tzedakah. So they call themselves successful. Look how successful I am. I've got a great business, and so on. So we actually say this is a fig mentality. It's not a grape mentality. This is a fig mentality. Let's go on. The next one would be a pomegranate. What's a pomegranate? So you also probably know that we're told that a pomegranate has got 613 seeds. It's as full of seeds as mitzvahs in the Torah. Next time you're eating a pomegranate and you've got nothing to do in lockdown, count the seeds and see if there's 613. I've done it a couple of times, and I'll tell you, to be honest, the one time I got 612, and the next time I got 614, and I didn't feel like checking again. But the fact of the matter is that it can sometimes be a symbol, a pomegranate, a symbol of all the mitzvahs, that all the Torah, we're as full, we should be as full of the mitzvahs as a pomegranate. But the interesting thing is that King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, uses the symbol of a pomegranate, where he says, your lips are like a thread of scarlet, your mouth is comely, your temple is like a piece of pomegranate within your locks. This comes from the Shir HaShirim, from the Song of Songs, a pomegranate. And here, what does it mean? The pomegranate expresses that that even though we may be, so the pomegranate has got a whole lot of little seeds. If you think about it, the pomegranate is a big fruit, but it's got a whole lot of little fruits inside it. There are these tiny little, each one of them is like a little fruit of its own. So this is the symbol of the fact that there could be a mode, a setting within our behavior, that we have got a lot of good deeds. We're doing certain things great. Wonderful, wonderful, lots of little deeds, but they're not really integrated. They're not really merged into one. So back to my analogy right in the beginning. You could be a really great person at davening, at learning Torah, at giving tzedakah, at anything, but it's not integrated. You're not actually there. Each one of them is like a little deed that's done by itself. It's not integrated. It's not all in one. It's not complete. And this perhaps is the symbol of the pomegranate. Let's move on. Talk about the olive. The olive, by the way, is a symbol of struggle. An olive tree, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, grows predominantly in a very hostile climate, in a hostile environment. We think about olive trees. I don't know about you. I think about olive trees. I think about dry places in Israel. And you see those olive trees growing on the side of the road or whatever. But more than that, the olive itself, while it provides the most fantastic oil, olive oil, and we all know that you can't have a kitchen today without olive oil. We've got to use olive oil, and it's very pricey, it's very expensive. But one of the things about the olive oil is that you've got to actually beat the olive to get the oil out of it. The olive is abused. It's got to struggle, and then it produces a little drop of oil. They use, I think, what they call a centrifuge, and they put it into this machine, and it really, really bashes the olive, and then a little drop of oil comes out to the bottom of the thing there. The olive represents struggle. Now, there are many, many people whose lives are a struggle, and we have an olive kind of a life means perhaps that we have to fight for everything. We've got to struggle for everything. We've got to struggle for parnosa, for money. We've got to struggle for food on the table. And then we've got to struggle for, for recognition. We've got to struggle with our relationships. There are struggles. And perhaps that is what the olive actually represents. And finally, we come to the date. Now, the date represents perfection. Why does it represent perfection? Because it's actually the date that is this tasty, delicious fruit. It is all integrated. It's all in one. And it doesn't have to be pressed. Although we talk about the date giving us honey, when we speak about the land flowing with milk and honey, we really talk about the honey that comes from dates. We talk about that as being the real flavor, the real honey, the sweetness that comes from it. This is the concept of perfection. When we finally get to that level of perfection and everything is wonderful and harmonious. So what's the real message behind this bracha that's given to each and every one of us? When it talks about our wheat and our barley and our grapes and our figs and our pomegranates and our olives and our dates, it's talking about the fact that we too have times and parts of our lives that could mirror each and every one of these. But we hope and pray that everything should be integrated into one, that there should be blessing in our struggles, that there should be blessing in our joy, that there should be blessing in the times where things are going swimmingly, harmoniously, and there should be blessing in the times where things are difficult. At all times, we should have Hashem's rich and wonderful brachas. Remember, this is given to the Jewish people when they're about to go into Eretz Yisrael. They're going into Israel. Hashem is maybe giving them an insight. We're going to go into that land. It's not always going to be that easy. It's not always going to be that wonderful. There are going to be struggles. There are going to be difficulties. The blessing should be that just like all of these fruits are necessary for the functioning of the country, these fruits are all necessary for the functioning of a Jewish soul. These fruits are all necessary for the functioning of a Jewish life. These things are all necessary to be blessed, and hopefully they will all be blessed in the right and in the correct way. I'm sure you've all been watching with a kind of a keen eye as to what happened the other night in Beirut with this terrible explosion. And you think about what happened there. I thought popped into my head, and I'm going to share it with you, what the loss of life and the terrible stuff there or whatever. It's incredibly it's heartsore to see anybody have to suffer and so on. But let's just think about when that actually happened. That happened just on the date. It was yesterday, right? Just on the date of Chamisha Asar B'Av, the 15th of Av. On the 15th of Av, there are many, many things that we celebrate, but one of the things that people don't remember so much that we celebrate on the 15th of Av is that there was a ceremony called the breaking of the axes. You know what that was about? Every year in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple, there were certain people who used to cut wood. Wood was needed for the altar, and they would chop down the wood. They would use axes to chop down the wood. They would chop down wood until the 15th of Av, because the 15th of Av came in the middle of the summer, as it is now in Israel. At the end of the wood chopping season, on the 15th of Av, there was a ceremony where they would destroy the axes that they used. Now, perhaps we can say one of the reasons that the axes needed to be destroyed is Jews don't like to keep dangerous weapons around. It's not, never mind the kashrus of your home, we're not allowed to have things in our house that are dangerous. You can't keep dangerous weapons. Dangerous weapons can eventually come to destroy you. And you think about what happened there. Well, it's certainly what they're saying, is that in Beirut, they were storing a whole shed load, a whole port there full of stuff to make bombs. Now, no matter what the excuse, and no matter what the reason, no matter how and how much, but when you keep something dangerous, eventually it's going to explode. You keep something dangerous, and it's happened to be on the day of the message of the destroying of the axes. We've got to get rid of dangerous things from our lives. We've got to get rid of things that could hurt others and that could hurt us. We've got to take them out of the equation. And maybe, just maybe, this is in God's world one of the reasons why such things occur on such profound and important dates. So, to sum up, please God, each and every one of us should be blessed to have a period of time now. We're in the 6 weeks now before Rosh Hashanah. We should be blessed to be able to move forward with Hashem's rich brachas in our wheat and in our barley, in our grapes, in our figs, in every part of us and our personal and national psyche, that it should just be blessed with great and wonderful and beautiful things, that no longer should we have to cry about lockdowns or lockups, and no longer should we have to cry about or think about, God forbid, death or illness or destruction or negativity, but rather be able to tap in to the power of positive energy. And perhaps it will all come to fruition for us as well, when we ourselves can integrate the heel and the ear, the sounds and the things that we tread underfoot, and we can recognize that in Hashem's world, everything and everybody is of paramount importance. That's my thought for you for today, and I look forward to being back with you again next week. And have a wonderful week and a good Shabbos.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Katz. Good Shabbos.